Hey folks, Sheriff Lamb here. Welcome back to another episode of On the Border with Sheriff Lamb, brought to you by FAIR, the Federation for American Immigration Reform. And I don't know, every time I do this, I get excited about the guests we bring on, but I'm super excited again today. We've got a great guest. He's the congressman from the 26th District of Texas. How can you not be great coming from the state of Texas? Youngest congressional member.
Youngest Republican.
Youngest Republican congressional member, father, part of the Judiciary Committee for Immigration Integrity, Security, Border Security, and Enforcement Subcommittee.
Yep.
Like I said, you're a father. That's always the most important thing to me.
Yep.
God-fearing man.
Yeah, it is.
I know you've got your wife and two kids.
Yep. And one of them, son, just born about 2.5 weeks ago.
Congratulations.
So very young.
Winston.
That's right.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Well, I got something for you. It's not as impressive as what you have there on your desk,
I've
got my Sheriff Lamb retired coin, American Sheriff retired coin.
This is great. We'll have to keep that with the little collection there.
And I know we got a bunch of questions for you today, but I was telling you before we turned on the cameras, my source of entertainment is sitting and watching you guys go after people in these congressional hearings and Senate hearings. I've always liked the way Josh Hawley goes after it, but I've been impressed with how intelligent you are, the work you do, homework you do coming after these folks and asking the tough questions. So.
I appreciate that.
That's got to be a little fun, isn't it?
It is way too much fun, actually. It is way too. That's the best part about the job, in many ways, is those hearings, and they have a meaningful impact too.
Yeah.
They build a lot of momentum behind real change.
Well, we appreciate you doing it.
Thank you.
Now, when I first was elected sheriff in 2016, took office 2017, it was at the same time as the first President Trump administration. Yep. So I had an opportunity to work under President Trump and how he did things. Fast forward, your first term is now under the second President Trump administration. We saw the first day something that we haven't really seen, where he just sat down and he was just signing these executive orders. But I was glad to see that a lot of these executive orders had a real impact on Texas, Arizona, because they were border-related executive orders. Whether it was declaring these guys terrorists and starting the wall again and all these things. When you look at all what he did the first day, what are some of the impacts that this had in your community out in Texas?
Yeah, the biggest issue in my district, I would say, and I think this is true across the country, is illegal immigration. I mean, remember, immigration broadly is something that touches every single part of life. It impacts crime and safety in your community. It impacts housing prices. It impacts the availability of social services. The ability to go to the hospital and get treatment quickly, not have to wait in lines. It impacts ultimately tax policy and fiscal issues as well. I mean, it really touches everything. And we saw how bad things got for 4 years under the last administration. And I think the American people were just so tired of it. And you saw, it really was a new dawn with the president. And coming in, building the wall, bringing back Remain in Mexico, bringing back just common sense border policies and restarting deportations. As well as anybody, border apprehensions down 95% within about a month. I mean, that is extraordinary. And that was before Congress even did anything. It was really, really incredible. So that's something that I think my district has been particularly pleased with the president.
Yeah, we felt the same thing. Like, we felt the effects of all the illegal immigration, all that stuff, the drugs coming in, the pursuits with people trafficking humans. Out of all those things, out of all those executive orders, all the impacts, what do you think whether it's national or whether it's your district, what do you think the biggest change was from the Biden policies?
Yeah, I think it was, if you could pick one thing, it was just securing the border and in reforming our asylum law. So he brought back Remain in Mexico. That's something we've spent a lot of time on. I've got a bill, the Remain in Mexico bill, that codifies that executive order into law. During his first administration, that law alone reduced border crossings by 70% within a few months. I mean, that is a huge impact. It's something Biden got rid of virtually on day one. But I think those are the common sense policies. If you're going to claim asylum, you can claim asylum, but you got to wait outside of the United States. And that's totally fair.
100%. That was one of the things that I said before the election. I was saying, look, you don't need to do a big changes, but do the Remain in Mexico program. Let Border Patrol do their job.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. I think the Remain in Mexico, and thank you for introducing that bill. A lot of people don't understand the Safe Third Country Act, and we haven't had one with Mexico. But even most of these people were coming through multiple countries before they even got to Mexico.
Right.
And so I agree with you. I think that's one of the biggest impacts.
Yep.
Now, you've also been a big supporter of the HR 1, that one big, beautiful bill. I love how he labels everything. President Trump is a genius on labeling these things. In there, there's a significant amount of money that's being allocated towards border and immigration issues. What are some of the things that you think out of that bill are probably going to be some of the more impactful things?
Yeah, and I think if you look at the bill overall, there's a lot of great things in it. There's an extension of the Trump tax cuts, hugely beneficial to the economy. Plus up of military funding, which we need after Joe Biden. There's rolling back the Green New Deal. There's a lot of social wins that we have in there on social issues. But of everything, the border security and deportations is, in my opinion, the most important thing. This is our chance to get real border funding, real border security, real deportations, because all of that costs money, and we've got to fund it. Unfortunately, we can't fund that on a bipartisan basis. So some of the things that it funds, for instance, is increasing ICE's footprint by 50%, the number of ICE agents. We're funding the full construction of the border wall. Good. We're funding river barriers across the entire border. We are funding deportation flights. It costs, like I said, it costs money to get these people that Joe Biden shipped into our country and get them back to where they came from. Yeah. And this bill pays for that. We've got the executive who's willing to execute on all the laws that are already on the books. So there's actually not a ton of policy changes for illegal immigration that we need. There's a few, there's a little bit we can do. But right now, they just need money. And this bill provides funding for what they need to be doing.
Yeah, when I looked at it, I was very pleased to see the amount of spending for border. I thought that was the most impactful piece of the bill. And above and beyond the funding, you talked about codifying, one of these things. Codifying in like Remain in Mexico. What else can Congress do to codify into some of these changes? Because like you said, he can fund it today, but the next guy can come in and let's hope there's not a bad next guy, but they could feasibly come in and change it again.
Yeah, exactly. And I think Remain in Mexico is the number one thing. But we've got to basically look at across the board, every policy that the Trump administration has taken via executive order and make that permanent.
Yeah.
We cannot allow another Democrat to unleash the same kind of hell on our country that Joe Biden did. So I think that's a great place to start. But really, right now, it's just getting them the money. That's what we've got to do as quickly as possible. I think we need longer term, much more significant reforms of our asylum laws. And I think we need to take a look at reforming our legal immigration system as well. Because that is, you hear people talk, it's a broken legal immigration system. It is. I mean, we're not choosing who we want to come into our country. We're allowing that to be chosen oftentimes by a lottery, by chance. We're not properly vetting the people who are coming in. We're allowing chain migration, about 250,000 people every single year, which is, I think most Americans agree, is an abomination. So there's a lot of work we need to do on that front as well.
Now I look at, and this is kind of off topic, but it kind of goes along with the codification of these things, is we are looking and we're seeing judges really kind of getting outside of the lane and really making decisions that don't just affect their district, they're affecting the entire country. Do you see Congress playing a bigger role now that the budget's been kind of dealt with? Yeah. Do you see Congress playing a bigger role in really codifying in some of these removal requirements, whatever it is? I think Congress has a space there.
Yeah, and we've got to push back against these rogue judges. I mean, you look at the number of nationwide injunctions that district courts have put against President Trump, there have been more nationwide injunctions against Trump in this term than the entirety of the 20th century. More in this term than in the Bush, Biden, and Obama White Houses combined. I mean, this is a targeted judicial strategy to hamstring the Trump administration across the board. And one of the big areas, of course, is immigration. I mean, we had a Maryland judge recently who wanted to delay deportations by 2 days across the country, by the way. I think that's a broad abuse of power. We passed the No Rogue Rulings Act out of the House just a couple months ago, and that would stop district court judges from issuing nationwide injunctions. I hope the Senate can take it up and pass it, because that's the kind of, I think, very simple but effective judicial reform we need.
And like you said, they make a decision. They don't realize that 2 days for every single person that's in this country illegally, the cost that it incurs to the taxpayer is tremendous. And so, yeah, I appreciate that you guys are focused on that. And I know you have specifically, today you dropped the New Idea Act. Tell us a little bit about what this New Idea Act is. I can tell you FAIR already supports it, but tell us a little bit about this New Idea Act you've got.
You know, you can frame it the same way the left frames illegal immigration is. Let's look at the root causes, right? That's what we heard for 4 years under the Biden administration. And one of the pull factors for illegal immigration is the availability of jobs in the U.S. Is that employers see that they can basically take an enormous amount of cheap foreign labor. I mean, these are people who are working oftentimes on basically serf wages. And they can get cheap labor on one hand, but they're oftentimes writing that off on their taxes on the other to reduce their tax burden. We're simply saying you can't write off wages going to illegal aliens on your taxes. That seems very common sense. It's one of those things that I think whenever most people hear that, they wonder why that's not already into law. So I think this could go a long way in at least reducing some of that pull factor. It's not going to solve everything, but it is one meaningful step in the right direction.
Well, and what I love about it is you guys are taking it and aggressively going after something that is causing, that's a problem. And most people sit and complain about it. I know you ran for office. I know you came from a very successful background. Look, I ran for the U.S. Senate I had a good job. You had a good job. You had your call for service is above and beyond that. And you didn't just say, hey, listen, we need to fix this. You actually got involved in it. And then you didn't just come here and be a shrinking violet. You're actually out there getting new ideas, putting it into action. And I appreciate that. That's
that a lot.
The way that approach. Before I go to the next question, and I know you get this, we get a lot of people that say, well, what about all the good people in this country that have come into this country illegally? And I always say, look, even though they're good people, they still broke the law and they came into the country illegally. That's against the law. They can't get a driver's license legally, so they're most likely driving without a driver's license, against the law. They can't get insurance, against the law. They might be using somebody's fake social security number. That's against the law. Like, there's just one thing after another that piles on it. Employees who get paid who don't pay taxes. And so I appreciate you taking a step forward to solve that issue. We talked about the judges. FAIR just released a report recently where there's over 1,000 cities or communities that are listed as sanctuary cities across this country. This is a problem because it creates issues for ICE when they're trying to do what the voters asked the president to do, which is remove people that came into this country illegally. That there's an estimate. FAIR also released an estimate, which I think it probably is higher than this. I think this is a very conservative estimate, that at least 18 million people are in this country illegally, which is the equivalent of what, 24 representatives here in Washington, D.C.?
I mean, think about that. That impacts congressional apportionment, and it benefits blue states at the expense of red states. It provides more congressional seats with them, which means more, in the end, more blue congressmen, more Democrat congressmen at our expense.
What do you make of these cities or these politicians, and we're even seeing it on a national level, politicians actually getting in the way or supporting sanctuary cities or advocating for this? What is your thought on that?
We found consistently, no matter what the issue is, and we've been talking about immigration a lot, especially in this administration, Democrats are always siding with the illegal alien over American citizens. No matter whether it's a criminal illegal aliens that we're trying to deport, think of members of Tren de Aragua, one of the most violent, ruthless drug cartels in the world. I mean, these are people who take sadistic pleasure in murdering and torturing their victims. Those are the people that Judge Boasberg, for instance, demanded President Trump fly back into the country as he was deporting them. And Democrats sided with the judge, from a political, ideological perspective. So consistently, they're working against the interests of the American people. I find it disgusting. I mean, it really is inexplicable, particularly given how unpopular the positions they're taking are. And you've seen a lot of polling data suggesting that voters trust Republicans on immigration more than Democrats, and this is exactly why.
And meanwhile, we have families like Laken Riley and Rachel Moore and Jocelyn Ngare and so many other families who didn't get any attention when they lost their loved ones. What kind of consequences from a congressional thing, when you're sitting here, you see this on TV, you see these communities, what kind of consequences do you think they should face? Because I do think they're violating the law. Title 8, 1324 says you cannot conceal, harbor, or shield anybody that you know to be in this country illegally. And I think in a lot of these places, that's what's happening.
It absolutely is. I mean, you're harboring somebody who shouldn't be here in the first place, and I think that we need to start investigating this aggressively. I think congressional hearings is the first place to start to build up a case, if there is one, and it seems like there is, against Democrats in sanctuary cities who are harboring these people, and then the DOJ can take it from there. Right. And if we find out that they violated any law, they do need to be held accountable.
Now, I know the DOJ has filed lawsuits against cities in New Jersey, Colorado, Illinois, New York for obstructing ICE operations. And we also saw that the committees last night, they opened an investigation on the Nashville mayor as well for potentially aiding and abetting these illegal aliens. And we saw in Congress strong support for cracking down on this illegal immigration, specifically sanctuary cities. We appreciate you guys doing the Laken Riley Act too. I think that was a really good piece of legislation. I ran into the family of Laken Riley, and I think it was, we can never get our children back when you lose them, but the one thing is to see something come from it. I know it makes them feel a lot better about that. But it was sad to see there was a lot of people that did not vote for it.
Right.
And it should have been a 100% vote.
And that was largely a party line vote, which is, I think, despicable. I mean, the Laken Riley Act was very, very simple. If an illegal alien commits theft or a few other crimes, they're deportable. I mean, that is common sense. That is as common sense as it gets. And still, Dems sided with the illegal aliens.
Common sense is not as common as as it once used to be. What other remedies does Congress have? What other things can Congress do? I mean, you've got the power of the purse. What can Congress do to some of these sanctuary cities and when they continue to fight against ICE? And I always said, look, Texas and Arizona, over the years, the last decade or more, we have taken measures to protect our states, only to have groups come in and challenge it. And then the big pushes said, well, this is not a state issue, this is a federal issue. Well, now that the script is flipped and you have a federal government's willing to do their job, now these states are getting in the way. What do you think, what can Congress do? What are some of the remedies to this?
I think you talked about going after and prosecuting for specifically harboring illegal aliens. On top of that, I don't think we should be providing any federal funding whatsoever to jurisdictions who have these sanctuary city policies in place. I think full stop, no money at all, and they can deal with the consequences. The problem with this is that these sanctuary cities are other pull factors. Illegal aliens know you cross the border. Once you get into the United States, you just need to go to New York or Chicago or any other place, and you're going to be pretty well taken care of there. Not only are the local police not allowed to work with ICE or other immigration officials, but you also tend to get an enormous amount of social services all on taxpayer dime. And that ends up being paid for by the rest of the country. So I think we ought to be defunding these jurisdictions outright.
Wow, I agree with you. I agree with you. And it was frustrating to watch as a sheriff, to watch tax dollars through NGOs being used to give hotel rooms and all these different things. Meanwhile, we have Americans that are struggling out there,
Right.
and our hard-earned tax dollars were going to to help or carry people that came into this country illegally.
Yeah, I mean, the NGO industrial complex is another area that we've been taking a look at. We had a hearing on that earlier today. But the idea that NGOs who are facilitating illegal activity are getting tax incentives and tax breaks is insane.
Right. Well, and it was through the shelter in place, their shelters and services through DHS that a lot of this money was coming from.
Yep. You know, another thing, we talked about the One Big Beautiful Bill earlier. Democrats are attacking us for some Medicaid reforms we're doing. One of the biggest ones we're doing is kicking 1.4 million illegal aliens off of Medicaid. We're kicking them off of food stamps as well. I mean, most people find the idea of people coming into this country illegally just totally repugnant, specifically whenever they're getting taxpayer benefits.
And it was a staggering amount. That's one thing Doge uncovered was the amount of money being spent on Medicaid and Social Security that were going to people that weren't even citizens of this country.
I mean, FAIR estimates the cost at $150 billion a year. Wow. I mean, talk about we're trying to be fiscally responsible here and rein in a $37 trillion debt. That's a good place to start right
That's
there.
a great place to start. And think about what you could do for Americans with $150 billion.
Absolutely.
We talk about Texas and Arizona. You guys in particular, in 2021, it was so bad that you guys had to launch Operation Lone Star.
Yeah.
Thank goodness you did, because with that, you guys were able to. I think the situation could have been so much worse had Texas not really stepped up. And I really think that Texas did a good job, and Governor Abbott did a good job of showing people what was going on, because these folks were being bused to other places.
Yep.
For every bus Texas sent, just so folks know, it was probably 10 buses that the federal government sent.
Yep.
But you guys did a good job of really highlighting the fact that this was not just a Texas and Arizona problem. But you did apprehend well over 530,000 people during that time.
Staggeringly high numbers.
You had 51,000 arrests with more than 43,000 felony charges. You seized over 625 million lethal doses of fentanyl. Man, does Texas get any of this money back?
You know,
is there money in this bill for that?
You know, that's something that the entire Texas delegation pushed very hard for, and we got in this bill. It was about $13 billion that Texas paid for some of these border security measures whenever, as you know, the federal government didn't do their job. I think it's only just that Texas is reimbursed for that. So we were able to get that, and I think that'll stay after the Senate works on this bill.
And I love it. And I think it should happen, because Texas was doing the job that the federal government should have been doing.
Exactly.
And how do you take what Texas was doing and kind of what can Congress do to make sure, like, the federal relationships, we always work together on the ground level.
Yeah.
But we had a real disconnect at the DC level, at the director level, secretary level. What can we do to make sure that states like Texas, Arizona, other border states have that, the measures, or what you guys did there can be replicated and fortified?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the more that local law enforcement can work with immigration authorities, ICE and DHS, the better. I mean, those are guys they know their communities, they've got boots on the ground already, and you have an enormous amount of resources there that's already being paid for, especially at a time whenever right now we just need as many immigration authorities as we can. I think that's one simple way to facilitate mass deportations.
You probably feel the same way I do. I'm sure you do, because you ran for office and you found out. But I think this Congress plays a really pivotal role in the future survivability of America with this immigration, border security, and what you guys are able to accomplish. Do you guys feel the weight of that here in Congress?
I certainly do, because I really think that mass migration is the biggest threat to Western civilization, into the United States in particular. You see what's happening in Europe, where you've got countries that have stagnant or declining GDPs, where their culture is just disintegrating, and they're basically filling the gap by importing the caliphate. Now, we have a little bit different of a dynamic in the United States, but the cultural problem with massive importation of people who oftentimes don't speak our language and don't adopt or care to adopt our culture is a real problem for our country. That is, if, like I said, if anything, the deportation funding and the One Big Beautiful Bill makes it worth it.
I agree. And I think a lot of people don't even understand there was an importation of people from Africa, from China, from all over the world, from Middle Eastern countries, from places where we are not in good relationships with
thousands
some
of
these
Chinese nationals.
Tens of thousands, and mostly military-age men.
Yep.
And I think that Congress's ability to really dial this in, the immigration piece, the border security piece, I think you guys are on the right track.
And it's now or never.
I agree. And I'm glad to have people like you up here.
Wow.
I appreciate that. I mean, before I give you a chance to give any last words, I know your wife, both of us have outkicked our coverage. My wife also wrote 2 books.
Nice.
Your wife wrote 2 books.
Yeah, so she wrote a book on whenever she was in high school, which is a Christian apologetics book geared towards young people. So it goes through a lot of the questions that they have about the existence of God and some of the philosophical questions that a lot of people have answers on. And then she wrote a second book a couple years ago, doing the same thing with abortion, going through pro-abortion arguments and debunking them. So she's been pretty active in the conservative space for quite a while now.
That's how you ended up in Congress. you had a strong wife behind you.
That's right.
Any last parting words? Anything you want your viewers
thank you
to
guys
listen
for
to?
everything y'all are doing. I mean, you guys FAIR provides a lot of good ammunition for us. The studies that you guys do, the statistics that we can go to FAIR and get and use in congressional hearings or use in debates that we're having is really, really impactful. So I just want to thank you guys for that.
Well, you can see why I was so excited, folks. Congressman Brandon Gill, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
And if you're not
Appreciate
following
it.
the congressman, make sure you get on and follow the work that he's doing. Go check out some of his videos on YouTube, holding people accountable and actually doing the yeoman's work here in D.C. for your constituents. I know it's very much appreciated. We as sheriffs, a lot of people tuning into this, our sheriffs, law enforcement, we appreciate the funding and just the continual support that we get in law enforcement with this president as well. President Trump has been extremely supportive of law enforcement. So I know I sleep a little better knowing there's men like you up here. And I thank you for your sacrifice, because I know you have 2 small children. You have a wife at home. I don't think anybody doesn't understand the sacrifice that your family makes for you to come here and try to fix the issues that we're dealing with across this country. We owe you a debt of gratitude, so thank you.
I appreciate that a lot. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and thank you everybody for tuning in to another episode of On the Border with Sheriff Lamb. Make sure you go check out FAIR at fairus.org. That's the Federation for American Immigration Reform. And God bless. We'll see you the next time.